let's talk about one of the most spectacular and honestly baffling mysteries anywhere on Earth. We're going to the high desert of Peru to look at a 2,000-year-old message, a message written on a scale that it almost defies belief. So get this, for about 500 years, a culture that had no system of writing spent generations carving these enormous figures into the desert floor. They drew them with incredible precision, but on such a massive scale that they themselves could never, ever see what they'd actually made. The drawings just sat there, perfectly preserved for 2,000 years until we invented the airplane. And the question that has haunted us ever since is pretty simple. Who were they drawing for? And believe it or not, this ancient mystery is hotter now than ever before. Because just recently, researchers found this many new figures. That's right, a team from Yamagata University used artificial intelligence to scan satellite images, and boom, they basically doubled the number of known figures almost overnight. We are absolutely living in the golden age of Nazca discovery. Okay, so before we dive into the why, let's just wrap our heads around the what. What exactly are we looking at when we talk about the Nazca lines? Because the sheer scale of this is, well, it's almost impossible to comprehend. We are talking about a 450 square kilometer canvas. I mean, that's the size of a big city. And because it's one of the driest places on the planet, it almost never rains, there's very little wind, these incredibly delicate lines have survived pretty much untouched for 2 millennia. The catalog is just staggering. Hundreds of straight lines, some running perfectly straight for dozens of kilometers, right alongside these massive geometric shapes, and of course, those famous animal figures. And when I say massive, I mean it. The hummingbird's wingspan is almost the length of a football field. The condor, it stretches 135 meters from its beak to its tail. These aren't just little doodles in the sand, they're monumental engineering projects. And what's really wild is that each one is drawn with a single continuous line that never crosses itself. So the big question is, how on earth did a pre-Inca culture with no complex tools pull this off? You know, for a long time, the how was a huge part of the mystery, and it fueled all sorts of wild theories. But as it turns out, the actual method is brilliantly simple. Yeah, people have actually gone out and proven you can do this with just basic tools. It's pretty straightforward. You start with a small sketch, you use a grid to scale it up, and then you have teams of workers who just carefully remove the dark surface pebbles to expose that lighter soil underneath. No aliens, no lost advanced technology, just some clever geometry and a whole lot of coordinated effort. And this is what makes it all so fascinating. Knowing how they did it doesn't get us 1 inch closer to understanding why they did it. Why would you dedicate centuries of labor to create art that only the sky could ever see? All right, let's get to the main event, the search for a purpose. Over the last century, 3 major theories have really dominated the conversation, and they range from the purely scientific to, well, science fiction. Right now, this is the leading hypothesis among most archaeologists. Think about it. In one of the driest places on Earth, water was absolutely everything. So this theory suggests the lines weren't meant to be seen from above at all. They were paths meant to be walked. Just imagine a ritual procession, walking the shape of a hummingbird to ask the mountain gods for rain. The figures themselves, spiders, hummingbirds, monkeys, they're often linked to water and fertility in their cosmology. It's a really powerful explanation, and it's rooted in pure survival. Now, this was the big idea championed by Maria Reich, the incredible woman who dedicated her entire life to saving the lines. She was convinced the whole plateau was a gigantic astronomical calendar, with lines pointing to the rising and setting of stars on important dates. And while some alignments do exist, modern statistical analysis has kind of shown that most of them don't really line up with anything significant. So this theory has lost a bit of favor over the years. And then there's this one. In his famous book, Chariots of the Gods, Erich von Däniken proposed that the lines were runways and signals for aliens. Now, to be clear, there is zero archaeological evidence to support this. But the reason it's so persistent is interesting, right? It gives a simple answer to that hardest question. Who were they drawing for? The theory says, beings in the sky. It's a very concrete answer, even if it's wrong, and I think that's why it's stuck around. So for decades, the debate was kind of stuck between those theories. But just recently, some incredible new clues have popped up from 2 very different places. A super close look at a single drawing and a high-tech scan of the entire desert. It turns out one of the most famous figures of all has been holding on to a secret that completely changes how we think about the Nazca people. Let's zoom in on that 46-meter-long spider. I mean, at first glance, it's just an incredible drawing. But the truly mind-bending part isn't the drawing itself. It's the specific species it depicts.
This is what entomologists figured out, and it's incredible. This isn't just any spider. It's a member of the Ricinae family, a tiny, rare creature found only deep in the Amazon rainforest hundreds of kilometers away. But it gets crazier. The drawing accurately shows a reproductive organ on the very tip of one leg, a detail that is only visible under a microscope. This isn't just art. It's a scientific illustration. It's proof the Nazca weren't some isolated desert tribe. They were part of a sophisticated knowledge network, and they were conducting systematic, scientific observations of nature.
And just as that incredible clue was sinking in, technology gave us another massive jolt. The investigation of the Nazca lines suddenly jumped forward into the 21st century. The team from Yamagata University used AI to do what human eyes just couldn't: scan super high-resolution imagery of the entire plateau. And the result? 303 new figures. But here's the truly groundbreaking part. Most of these new figures are smaller, and they're located right next to ancient pathways. This completely changes the story. It suggests that the giant figures we all know and love, they weren't the beginning. They were the end of a tradition that probably evolved over centuries, starting as simple path markers and growing into these giant offerings to the sky. So, after all of this, where does that leave us? Well, we know how they were made. We have brand new clues about their incredible knowledge and how their Earth evolved. And yet, the central question, it remains as open and vast as the desert sky itself. So here it is, the final case file. We've got a 2,000-year-old art installation covering 450 square kilometers. We have over 1,100 confirmed figures, and we're still finding more. All of it made by a culture that left us not a single word of explanation. They drew for 5 centuries, and then they just vanished, leaving only their silence etched into the sand. So in the end, it really comes down to this one question. Were the Nazca lines ritual paths, walked in ceremony and prayer, a landscape covered in petitions to the gods of water and the mountains, never actually meant to be seen from above at all? Or were they offerings made to something in the sky? Drawings made for eyes that looked down, from a culture that knew in some way that we just don't understand that something or someone up there was watching. What do you think?